Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. Today, we're looking at the Zenith El Primero Stratos Flyback Chronograph Pole-to-Pole Limited Edition, 45.5 millimeters in what Zenith calls Alchron black alloy. The bottom line is that this watch represents something of a reincarnation of the 1990s Zenith El Primero Rainbow Flyback pilot's watch. So let's put it on the wrist. Let's unpack the look, the fit, the feel, and the story of this watch. Now you can see on my wrist 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference. This is a watch that's going to polarize opinion along the lines of appearance because the fit is comfortable and honestly, ergonomically, I could wear this all day. So ultimately, if your wrist is around 6 inches, you're going to like this watch or dislike it based on whether or not you enjoy the appearance of a large, dominant visual presence on the wrist. You can see that the lugs are very short and the strap will pull down almost perpendicular, so ergonomics again is not going to be the limitation on who can wear this watch or who would wear this watch. Rather, it's going to be a matter of individual taste that comes down to the style. And I'm very happy to say that because there are quite a few who would love to be able to wear this watch on a smaller wrist, and I'm happy to say that that's easily done due to the lightness of the Alchron alloy, which I'm going to give up the game a bit, is basically an alloy of aluminum, so it's much, much lighter than steel, almost feels comparable to forged carbon in mass, so this watch, despite its size, fits very light on the wrist. Now, it's about 14 millimeters thick. It's probably not going to slide under a dress cuff of any kind, but then again, the all-black watch look is probably the worst match for formal attire available. It's stark, it's sports-themed, it's aggressive. This is a watch for wearing during the good times, perhaps not the finer times. Now, the strap itself, being manufactured of textile, again, is remarkably flexible for a textile strap. These, especially when virtually new like this one, have a tendency to be almost as stiff as a piece of wood. That is not the case with the textile that Zenith employs, and in fact, that's even, I would say, improved upon by the fact that underneath there's a sewn-in rubberized layer that is very supple indeed, almost silky smooth against the skin. So what touches the skin is as soft as natural rubber. Again, very accommodating, very comfortable, and ergonomic triumph. And Zenith also triumphs aesthetically, giving you the security of a twin trigger deployant clasp. You can see the twin trigger allowing very secure release with the prevention of an accidental release. But once you have it buckled up, I'll show you how that works, it has as low a profile as a traditional pin buckle. So it looks like a pin buckle. It sits nice and low profile so it doesn't dominate the side view of the watch. Again, very discreet but very functional. It's clever, it's sort of a vintage look, the best of both. The look of a buckle and the security of a deployant. But the highlight of this watch is the 45.5 millimeter Alchron black case, and it's dominated by a large ceramic polished bezel. Now the bezel right here, being made of ceramic, is unidirectional, which might be a bit counterintuitive for a pilot's watch, but because the watch also sports 100-meter water resistance and a screw-down crown, it's no longer strictly a pilot's watch as the old Rainbow was during the 1990s. This one is more of a jack-of-all-trades sports watch. It's happy to go diving off the boat. It's happy to go airborne if you do fly. The bottom line is that there's a lot of flexibility engineered in. And of course, you have a chronograph to time one interval, and by lining up the index of the unidirectional dive bezel with the minutes hand, you get a second sort of impromptu chronograph for timing intervals up to 60 minutes, from 0 to 60 minutes with the bezel. So a lot of functionality, also fantastic legibility. Zenith uses diamond-polished indices and hands to ensure that it's always easy to tell the time of day, and the watch is abundantly loomed. If you want to check out the loom shots on our website Watch One, I highly encourage you to do so because they show just how functional the successor to the Rainbow officially is, and the Stratos is definitely that. Now, like the ancestral Rainbow, this watch features Zenith's caliber 405 El Primero Flyback chronograph. So you don't have to stop the chronograph in progress, essentially. Just press the reset. It resets and restarts just like that with the press of one button. Now this is great if you're timing events that are close coupled or in rapid succession, such that you don't want to stop, reset, restart the chronograph. Being able to simply press and reset allows you to start timing that second event the instant the first one ends. Now there is a nice chapter ring that's built in, and this is actually a telemeter scale, so this is a different type of calibration. It's a metallic rehaut or chapter ring around the outer wall that surrounds the dial, and what it does is it visually unifies the high bezel with the low dial, and the way you use it essentially is the reverse of a tachometer, whereas the object being measured, speed in the case of a tachometer, is slower the longer it takes for the chronograph seconds hand to reach its mark by the time that object covers usually a standing kilometer. The telemeter works in reverse. So the longer it takes for you to hear a sound, the farther away an event was. So the constants here are the speed of sound essentially at sea level, and also the time, which is constant and traced by the chronograph hand. So then you can actually see the kilometers distant from you based on the amount of time it takes the chronograph hand to sweep the telemeter scale from the time you see an event in the distance. For instance, let's say a fireworks explosion. You start the chronograph and you watch the chronograph hand sweep the telemeter scale. When you hear the report, you stop it, and then you look at the meter measurement, and that's how far, or not the meter measurement, but the calibrated measurement, and that's how many kilometers away the firework detonated from your vantage point. So that's how a telemeter works. Zenith gives you one on the Stratos. Now you can see the pole-to-pole signature logo at 6 o'clock, and what that means basically is that this watch is dedicated to a fellow named Johan Nielsen from Sweden. There's a very small Swedish flag at the very base of this logo, and from 2011 to 2012 he kind of did the impossible, and he combination skied and biked quite literally from the North Pole to the South Pole. It took him a good long time. If you remember the Emmanuel Coindre Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Compressor Extreme World Chronograph dedicated to the dude who paddled across the Pacific Ocean, there's kind of shades of that going on. And this limited edition of 500 pieces from 2011 is dedicated to Nielsen's superhuman exploit. Just below you see the jump date window, a little bit unconventional for an El Primero. If you remember the old Rainbow of the 90s, it would have been located at 430, but the functionality is the same. Now on the case back, you can see the famed movement in all its glory, with its combination of blued and polished screws, depending on whether or not they're individually used for the regulation of the watch or the assembly of its pieces, blue being associated with the regulation of the watch. Now Zenith's El Primero is an all-time great. The first fully integrated automatic high-beat chronograph movement beat everyone to the game in 1969, and the bottom line is it remains an important piece of history and one of the most highly regarded chronograph movements to this day. Because it beats 10 times per second, it can resolve intervals of time as small as 1/10 of a second, making it potentially more accurate, or at the very least more precise, than a conventional chronograph, and the threshold for human reaction time is 1/10 of a second, so this is right up against the human limits here. And because the escapement beats at an escalated rate, if you put it up to your ear, it's got a unique song to it, almost like a sewing machine running overtime, a hyperactive convention hall full of sewing machines perhaps, but it's got a unique siren song to it that Zenith fans absolutely love. Also very durable. It's important to note that this movement for a generation formed the basis for the Rolex Cosmograph Daytona chronograph movement. Rolex called it the caliber 4030, so if that isn't the ultimate seal of approval, I don't know what is. The nice thing about the El Primero is it's a traditional column wheel chronograph, so you get nice, crisp start, stop, reset, and flyback reset when you actuate it, with a nice click report, an audible sign of the chronograph function being cycled. It's the old-fashioned way of making a chronograph. It's not the cam or shuttle method. It's a pleasure to use, it's a pleasure to hear, and it always ensures that you're sort of linked to the heritage of horology when you're operating an El Primero. And the other nice thing about the El Primero is it has a superior power reserve. In spite of being a high-beat movement, which generally drains the power reserve faster, the El Primero features a 52-hour autonomy off the wrist if you put it down at full wind. So it could just about make it through a weekend, depending on when you put it down on Friday. And the bottom line is it's an all-time great, being tough, durable, distinctive, and historically significant. You combine the El Primero heritage, the caliber 405 flyback variant, with this beautiful Stratos flyback pole-to-pole limited edition. You've got something that's very contemporary, and yet at the same time has a neat backstory and is tied to an important piece of high horology history. This is the Zenith El Primero Stratos Flyback Pole-to-Pole limited edition, available on our website, Watch You Want.